I'm going to start out by reading. I was like, what should I preach on this Sunday? And I thought, David and Bathsheba, that would be the best sermon to go for. So let's go all in on this today. So we have 2 Samuel. You thought I was joking, didn't you? 2 Samuel, we're reading verses 1 through 5. And so here's the word of the Lord read over you this morning. In the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Verse 2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch, and he was walking on the roof of the king's house. And he saw from that roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. Verse 3. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Verse 4. So David's messengers took her, and she came to him, and he laid with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanliness. Then she returned to her house, in verse 5, and when the woman conceived, she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." What do you do with all this morning? Why would I choose this as my opening text as your pastor my first Sunday? Well, we're in a season of transition. You guys, Paige mentioned it, you guys felt it. You've been waiting, and the question that we're asking over these next 4 weeks is, now what? What are we supposed to be doing during this season of transition? A lot of us are thinking, whew, we've done it. We hired a new pastor. I can just sort of lay back, relax, and just let things go on cruise control. I'm going to push against that narrative this morning. And so let's just start this way. I'm going to 2 Samuel. I don't know if you catch that, if you caught that in the very beginning, that there was an expectation for the king and his army when they went out to battle in the spring. But what happened? David did what? He remained at Jerusalem. Now, this was a subtle decision. How many of you know that some of the biggest mistakes in our life just happen by making small choices, one at a time, and before we know, a domino effect occurs. And for David, this wasn't a dramatic fall or an open rebellion. In fact, this was just a man who stayed when he should have left. And to be honest, David had plenty of good reasons to stay home. How many of you had a good reason to stay home this morning, but you decided to come? We have good reasons to stay. And David, he spent years running from Saul through the wilderness and running and escaping with his life, and he was sleeping in caves. He earned some rest. David fought the Philistine on multiple occasions, and he unified a divided kingdom. He brought the ark of God back into Jerusalem. He built a palace. He established a government. He created an administration. He wrote songs in the middle of a suffering that people are still singing and memorizing today. By any human measurement, David had done enough. David had earned the right to stay home. Nobody in Israel would have questioned him of that. All right, yeah, we understand. Yeah, just stay home. Nobody would have said a word. But here's the challenge, and here's the problem. We don't live our lives according to people's standards for us. As Christians, we're told whether we live or whether we die, we live for the Lord. You see, God never called David to that rooftop. God called David to lead his men in battle. And sometimes this is where we get in trouble, because as people of God, we often want to go by what we feel instead of by what God has decreed. How many of you struggled with that this week? We heard the prayers of confession this morning. If you're a Christian, you don't get to choose your assignment. And there's a good reason for that. Church, we're told that we were bought with the precious blood of Christ. A price was paid for you, and that we are not our own, but that we belong to God, both body and mind and also soul. And what God calls you to do does not pause because you feel. David had good reasons to stay home. He just didn't have God's permission. But I think many of us can sympathize with David's struggle, can't we? We have a lot of reasons why we should just sort of relax. I would just rather watch and stream a movie versus pray right now. I would rather just sort of scroll. I just need to unplug. I want to pull up to my house, but before I go inside, please just give me 10 minutes of alone time, and you just sit in the driveway. And then all of a sudden, someone's knocking on your window. Can't I just get a break? And maybe like David, you have been sort of sitting on your spiritual couch. You've been gazing off of your spiritual rooftop, thinking of perfect, logical excuses for why now in this new season it's a good time to sort of slow down, to step back, and to let somebody else carry the weight. Maybe you said, I've been here for years and I deserve a break, and I'm not discounting that at all. Again, as we're giving these examples, I'm not lofting at you just these expectations, but what I want you to do is to begin to filter these thoughts through how you feel and what God is calling you to, because often they're two different things. Maybe some of you said, I haven't become a covenant partner yet, so nobody can really tell me what to do around here, and I'm just going to be my own, to use the words of the Woods' game, your own desperado. But maybe you said, I'll get back involved when sort of things settle down. When things are just sort of there. Maybe you said in your heart, I was hurt and nobody checked on me, so you pulled back subconsciously. Maybe you said, I'm just waiting to see how this sort of new pastor thing settles down and how the dust settles before I commit to anything. How many of you have had that thought today? Maybe you didn't say anything at all. Maybe for you, you just sort of quietly disappeared from your post just during this transition season, just one Sunday at a time, and before you know it, you're no longer a part of the congregation, but you're a part of the crowd and you're watching from behind. David didn't have a dramatic reason. He just remained. But remaining when God says go is its own kind of disobedience. Remember, church, this morning, we want to discern what is the Lord calling you to do individually, and then corporately as a church, as one body, what is He calling us all to participate in? And if it doesn't look like sin from the outside, it can often look like disobedience from the inside. But it can come in the form of rest. It can come in the form of self-care. It can come in the look of it. It looked reasonable. It looked responsible. And that's why I'm not participating. But the rooftop, church, the rooftop is always the stop next after you allow your feelings to guide you instead of your faith, to decide your trajectory. And that's the danger. Those are some of the things, and we're this now what season, we want to make sure that we just don't disengage because it feels like it's the proper time to do so. Remember, we want to discern what the Lord is calling you to and what the Lord is calling us to. Verse 2 of our text states that it happened late one afternoon, when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, when he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and that woman was very beautiful. It happened, church. You may not know when, you may not know how the devil is going to try to trip you up, but you can count on this: it will happen. It will occur. It can happen on your way home today. In fact, it may have tripped you up this morning on your way to church. Genesis 4:7 says this, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching. Look at that picture. It's crouching. It's ready to pounce. And its desire is for you, but you, church, must rule over it. For David, it happened one late afternoon when he saw what he shouldn't have seen. He shouldn't have been on that rooftop. He should have been on the battlefield leading his people. And it happened. He saw her. And watching her bathe wasn't good enough. He needed to know who that was. And you realize that's sort of how sin works in our life? Sin will isolate you, sin will captivate you, and eventually sin will consume you. And it happens. You never meant for it to. It just happens. But here's the hard part with sin, especially with our Western mindset. We think very individualistic about what it is about us, what makes me happy, what must I do, and there's a lot of that first-person individualization that takes place. But your sin doesn't stop with just you. Your sin will not be your only victim. You will not be the only victim of your sin. In fact, sin never just stops with you. Sin works like a blacksmith who never sleeps. It forges one link at a time, quietly, methodically, and patiently. A look became a link. A thought became a link. A decision became another link. And a cover-up became another link. And before you realize what is happening, the chain is already around you. How many of you have been bound by sin before? It's difficult to break, isn't it, church? You are bound to desires you never intended to serve. And you're victimizing people you never intended to hurt. So let me say it again, church. Your sin never stops with just you. Look at the links in David's life. David stays home. David sees Bathsheba. David inquires about who she is. Now in verse 3, David's servants respond by saying this, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Remember, we're tracking this thought that your sin doesn't stop with you, but it overflows. And when David heard those names, in fact, when he heard that that is the wife of Uriah, that should have been the end of the story. But sin pushes boundaries. Sin causes us to trespass, knowing you know what that boundary is, but instead you step over that boundary instead. Eliam is one of David's elite 30 warriors. Not only that, but he was also the grandson of Ahithophel. And Ahithophel was one of David's most closest advisors. Then Uriah, he was also counted among David's warriors as elite. In fact, you don't live that close to the king's palace by accident. The fact that David could clearly see Bathsheba bathing from the rooftop tells you exactly what kind of man Uriah actually was. Uriah was faithful enough to earn that address. Uriah was trusted enough to live that close to the palace. Uriah was loyal enough to be the king's neighbor. And I'm telling you, church, our personal sins will make you make agreements with you that will convince you that it only impacts you. No one knows. No one cares. No one's here to see what you're doing. It's okay. Just indulge. But it never stays like that because sin is toxic. And toxins don't ask for permission before they spread. They just seep into the ground beneath you. They poison the water around you. They contaminate the people who you never intended to contaminate. In fact, they didn't even know you were carrying it. And I think verses 4 and 5 are proof of that. So if you look at verses 4, it says this, So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanliness. And then she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. What started with a season of staying, of self-care, of I just sort of need to relax and let everyone else go do their own thing and just let me chill from behind the scenes. What happened during a season of staying when it was supposed to be a season of going led to a look on the rooftop that is about to be one of the most expensive mistakes that David will ever make. Because sin never just cost you what you thought you were paying. Sin always has hidden fees. David tried to cover it up. He called Uriah home, hoping that he would sleep with his own wife and never suspect a thing, but that failed. He got Uriah drunk. That failed too. So the man who penned the words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside the still waters," picks up a pen and begins to write out Uriah's death warrant. And Uriah carried his own execution order back to the front lines without ever knowing what was in the envelope. Look at what this season of staying instead of going has blossomed into. A look became lust. Lust became adultery. Adultery became deception. Deception became murder. Every cover-up became more costly than the next. Then if you read this account this week, and I hope you do, you will find out that God sent the prophet Nathan to confront David for his sin. And the prophet ends with a simple 4-letter words that stopped David dead in his tracks. And he said, "David, you are the man." And remember, this all started because David wanted to take a season off, because David allowed his flesh to allow him to see how he feels versus being led by his faith. The consequences of that dedication, of dedicating himself and deciding himself to go with the flesh instead of faith, opened floodgates that David could have never imagined. How many of you have made agreements with sin, and it took you further than you wanted to go? And you're telling stories that you never thought you would tell, and you're trying to cover up what you never thought you would try to cover up, and before you know it, it's just a monster that you cannot control. And then Nathan tells David that because of his season of staying and his engagement to sin, that sword and strife would never leave his house. The infant that Bathsheba would carry for 9 months and give birth to would not survive. David's own sons would eventually turn from him and turn on him. Ammon would later violate his sister Tamar. Absalom would lead a rebellion against his own father. Strife, bloodshed, betrayal would follow David's family life for generations and generations. All of it, every bit of those nuances and those encounters of sin and strife and sword can be traced back to that rooftop moment. Traced back to that season of staying when he should have been going. You see, church, sin will ride you harder, and it will push you further than you ever intended to go. What begins as a whisper becomes a wind, and what becomes a wind becomes a storm. And before you know it, that storm has taken your family, has taken your integrity, has taken your anointing, and your peace has been destroyed, and you are left with nothing but wreckage where life used to be. So now what? Where do we go from here? What do we pull away from David's life? What are some life lessons that you can walk away from this morning and apply to you to make sure that what we're going through, what we're transitioning into, is not undone from all the faithfulness that has led up to this moment? Well, here's what I want you to know. Before 2 Samuel 11, David's resume was extraordinary. As a teenager, he killed Goliath. He wrote the Psalms that the whole world still sings over 3,000 years later. He united the kingdoms, the north and the south, and God himself called David a man after his own heart. But here's what I want you to know. A great track record, a great resume, a great season of faithfulness will not protect you from the consequences of one season where you decide to allow your faith to rule, your flesh to rule over your faith. Your past faithfulness will not sustain you for what's next. And that's why it's so important, church, that as we enter into this new season, wherever the Lord may be calling us to go, I have no idea. I can't even tell you how to get to my house, let alone where this church is going. But I do know that we as a church need to be prepared, and that you in your own life need to live a life of holiness, that you need not to toy and tinker with sin, because we need everyone on their game. So here's where we can grow. Church, you've worked hard. This church has worked hard. For 2 years, you've kept the doors open, you kept the lights on, you've kept showing up. God has been moving in your midst. There have been people who've been added to your numbers. And you kept believing, and you kept praying that God would answer prayers. And he has. Isn't it amazing? When we think about our prayer life and just praying and seeking after God, the fact that I've been praying, you've been praying, and you're an answer to my prayers, and I'm an answer to your prayers. God is clearly moving. But we can't allow sin to seep in and to stop that movement. And here's where you can grow. Your faithfulness got you here. My faithfulness got me here. But only continued faithfulness will get us where God wants us to go next. And there is a next, church. There is something that Lord is leading us to do and to be a part of. There are people out there that need to hear the good news of gospel. There are people who need to come and hear who are bound by sin and need to be set free. And this is the worst possible moment to let your guard down, church. And the best possible moment to push harder than you've ever pushed before. What can the Lord do if we are all on our game, seeking him, walking in a united front? So what can we show? I want you to leave here today with a decision. Not rooted in your flesh, not rooted in how you feel, but rooted in your faith. The difference is you can achieve in your flesh that you don't need faith for. We could easily set simple goals of, I just want to be here on Sunday mornings. That's it. That's all I need to do. But what does a faith goal look like? And so I want to challenge you to leave here with a decision rooted in faith. So this can help. Let me use this to help facilitate that. I want to ask you just 2 questions to help facilitate your faith to grow, to move you from flesh to faith. The first is, what commitments do you need to make? You as an individual. What commitments do you need to make in order to remain faithful in walking in faith? Is it your attendance? Is it your giving? Is it your serving? Is it your prayer life? Is it your involvement in the lives of other people in the church? I have no idea. But I do know that the Spirit of God, if you seek him, you will be found by him. If you call to him, he will answer you. So name it. Don't leave here with a feeling. Leave here with a decision rooted in faith this morning, church. And the second is this. What sins in your life do you need to break? What sins in your life do you need to break? Men of God, those of you who are married, you realize that the Bible says that the way you treat your spouse can either help or hinder your prayers being answered. Maybe you need to step up your game in your home life and love your spouse more and serve her like Christ has served the church. I don't know. I can tell you this, it's a lot easier to say that with my wife back in New York. What have you been entertaining on your rooftop that you can't bring into this next season? What sin are you carrying that needs to be laid down that we don't bring into this next season, church? You as an individual member of this church, you as an individual attender of this church, the way you live impacts the rest of us. Remember, your sin never just is isolated with you. It spills out, and it impacts others. You have a responsibility, church, to live like Christ has called us to live. And for those of you that are struggling to live a righteous and holy life, let me encourage you by saying this. Proverbs says that the righteous, though they may fall 7 times, they get back up 8. Some of you need to get back up. So know this. Know that what got you here won't sustain you in this next season. Grow in your faith and not your flesh, and show a renewed commitment and crucify your rooftop sins. That's your challenge. And for those of you who are weary, those of you who are heavy laden, may this verse supply your faith to encourage you to move forward. But they who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and never be weary, church. And they shall walk and never faint. And I hope you're seeing the cadence there. If you're not a flyer and you're not soaring with eagles, it's okay. You can still walk. If you're not a runner and you're a flyer, let the Lord let you soar. But the challenge, wherever you are and whatever stage you're in, is to wait upon the Lord. Can we do that, church? We can wait upon the Lord, can't we? It's harder than it sounds because we're going to want to get ahead of Him. We're going to get behind Him. But we need to be in tune with Him so that the shepherd can lead us to what is next and unify us around a mission and a calling that He calls us to be a part of.